I'll tell you something strange, when Elon Musk landed in Rome that Tuesday night, there wasn't a single headline about it. No photographers. No live tweets. Just a matte black Tesla Model X waiting at the airstrip and a driver who didn't ask questions. That, in itself, was the first sign something unusual was going on. You have to understand Elon doesn't do quiet entrances. The man tweets in Morse code and makes headlines with memes. But this time, he was silent. No one knew he was in Italy. Well, almost no one that I got wind of it from a source at Ciampino Airport. Said Musk came in on a private Gulfstream under a shell company registered in Luxembourg. Even weirder. His only listed meeting was with, well, that's the part that made me stop mid-coffee, Pope Francis. Now, popes don't exactly take unscheduled meetings with tech moguls. Their calendars are tighter than a Swiss watch. But something about this visit bypassed protocol. Musk wasn't here for a blessing. He was here for something far older, far more guarded: the Vatican archives. Or more precisely, the secret vaults beneath them. You've probably heard of the Vatican secret archives, those mythic chambers said to hold lost gospels, ancient prophecies, even extraterrestrial correspondence if you believe the late-night podcasts. Most of it is rumor, of course. But some of it isn't. And Musk, with his eye on Mars and mind on eternity, was drawn like a moth to their flame. That I found out later from someone who used to wear the robes that Elon had made a very specific request: access to the oldest, most protected texts in the Vatican's possession, not for a documentary. Not for history. For something else. Technological parallels, he said. I want to see what they knew, what we might have forgotten. It sounded like science fiction. But in a room full of marble saints and 15th-century frescoes, he said it with the sincerity of a monk, and at first, believe it or not, the Pope agreed. No cameras. No official record. Just the two of them, the innovator and the pontiff, seated in a high-ceiling chamber inside the Apostolic Palace. I wasn't in that room, obviously, but I know what happened next because someone just outside the door heard everything. Musk explained his theory. That lost knowledge, ancient wisdom, maybe even blueprints, had been locked away centuries ago, not out of fear, but out of misunderstanding. And he wanted to see it. Learn from it. Maybe, use it. He spoke of sustainable energy, ancient engineering, hidden maps of magnetic fields. His voice, they said, was calm but urgent. And for a moment, Pope Francis listened. Until he didn't, because the second Elon mentioned replication, the possibility of building something inspired by divine design, the mood shifted. Drastically. No, the Pope said, quietly but firmly. These were not made for men to wield. And that's when things broke. The meeting ended abruptly. Elon left, face unreadable. The Vatican guards resumed their posts. And for the next 3 days, the Pope refused to take Musk's calls. What had begun as a quiet meeting between giants had just become the spark of a very public, very personal feud, but no one knew, not yet. The world was still turning, and Elon's next move was already in motion, because if there's one thing I've learned watching Elon Musk, he doesn't like hearing the word no and the Pope. He doesn't say it lightly. It started small, as most storms do. A few murmurs among Vatican insiders. A half-sentence whispered during a diplomatic lunch in Milan. One cardinal, and I won't name him, was overheard saying, he asked to see the vault. The real vault. That alone would have been gossip. But the word replication. That's what made it spread like incense smoke in a closed cathedral. By the end of the week, the Vatican's inner circle wasn't just unsettled. They were on edge, and then came the homily. It was a crisp Sunday morning, sunlight pouring through the stained glass of St. Peter's Basilica. The crowd stretched beyond the colonnades, as it often does when the Pope addresses the public. Cameras were rolling, translations broadcast in real time. Nothing unusual until he deviated from his notes. No names. No finger-pointing. But the tone, oh, the tone. There are those, Pope Francis said, his voice rising with each word, who seek to build their own towers of Babel. Who believe that with machines and money, they may outpace the hand of God. But beware those who chase hidden knowledge, not with reverence, but with ambition. He paused deliberately. Looked out at the thousands gathered. Then added, "There is no salvation in vaults of forgotten secrets. Only shadows." It was subtle. But not really. Not if you'd been following the whispers. To those watching closely, it was clear, the Pope was talking about Elon Musk, and Elon. He wasn't one to let a parable go unanswered. The very next day, he tweeted, of course, a quote from Galileo: "All truths are easy to understand once they are discovered, the point is to discover them." No caption. No mention of the Vatican. But the message was loud enough to echo through the Sistine Chapel. That tweet alone sparked a media frenzy. Analysts speculated. Headlines flared. Was Elon clashing with the Pope over theology? Over science? Over power? No one knew the details, but everyone smelled the fire. Commentators from both sides, secular and religious, took positions. Some called Musk bold. Others called him dangerous, but the ones who mattered were the investors. And they were nervous. Within a week, stock in Tesla dipped. Not a plunge, but a noticeable slide. A few million here. A few billion there. SpaceX saw a couple of contract delays. Whisper campaigns began swirling in European political circles. Can someone so openly opposed to the Vatican be trusted with orbital infrastructure? The strangest part. The Vatican didn't say anything more. Not officially. But their silence. That was the message. Behind closed doors, bishops advised caution. Vatican-friendly media began pushing opinion pieces about the ethical limits of technology. And then, to really drive the point home, the Pope delivered a speech at a tech and ethics summit in Munich. No direct mention of Musk again, but the undertones were deafening. When power is not questioned, he said, it becomes idolatry. By then, Elon's frustration had grown. People close to him said he was obsessed. Not angry, obsessed. He reread transcripts from their meeting. Reviewed books on Vatican history. Began studying the vaults not as mythology, but as missed opportunities. That I remember someone from his inner circle telling me, he wasn't mad that the Pope said no. He was mad because he believed the Church was sitting on something humanity could use and refused to share. He couldn't shake the thought. What if, beneath the marble and gold, behind those centuries-old locks, were ideas? Machines? Data that predated Da Vinci and Tesla, the man, not the company? Ideas that could reshape clean energy. Or unlock quantum memory. Or map gravitational fields in ways no satellite had yet done. And while the Pope spoke of restraint, Elon began drafting new plans, but the damage was already rippling. In the public square, more and more influential voices were speaking out, not against innovation, but against what they called tech messianism. The belief that technology could replace morality. That algorithms could outvote ancient wisdom. By mid-month, a prominent Catholic business network released a chilling op-ed. A billionaire asked to unlock the Ark. When denied, he turned the world against the priest. That line stuck. It was everywhere. Elon tried to ignore it, of course. Tried to focus on X, on Starlink, on Mars. But the numbers didn't lie. Public trust had slipped. Markets responded. Quietly, but steadily, and so, for the second time in less than a month, Elon Musk flew to Rome. No press release. No airport photos. Just the same Gulfstream, the same black Tesla, and this time a much heavier heart, because this time, he wasn't coming to ask, that he was coming to apologize. The second time Elon Musk entered the Apostolic Palace, there were no grand theories. No charts, no pages of speculative history, just him. Quiet, dressed in gray. No security detail. No staff trailing behind him. Even his phone had been left behind by request. The Vatican had insisted. No devices. No signals. Nothing that might disrupt the stillness of what was to come. This time, it wasn't a secret meeting. But it wasn't public either. Let's call it sanctioned silence. It was a cloudy afternoon in Rome. Rain tapped faintly against the palace windows. Inside, in a modest receiving chamber, no gold, no grandeur. Pope Francis waited. Seated alone in a wooden chair, hands folded, his expression unreadable. Elon stepped in without a word. The two men hadn't spoken since that first meeting. Not directly. Messages had passed through channels, of course. Formal regrets. Clarifications. But no real contact. And now, after weeks of global speculation, Elon stood once again before the most influential spiritual figure on earth, this time not as a seeker, but as a man who had, in some way, trespassed. The Pope motioned for him to sit at an O staff. No cameras. Just two minds, two visions, one long, shared silence, and then, Elon spoke, not with his usual cool confidence. Not with rehearsed rhetoric or intellectual fire. His voice was low. Measured. At moments uncertain. I misjudged the weight of what I was asking, he said. Not just the access, but the meaning behind it. I thought I was seeking truth, but maybe I was reaching for something that wasn't mine to take. The Pope didn't respond immediately. He watched. Listened. And when he did speak, his voice was firm, not in anger, but in memory. Do you know what sits beneath this city, Elon? He asked. Not just stone. Not just parchment. Time. Fear. Choices that were made by men who believed the world wasn't ready for what they saw. You walked in thinking we were gatekeepers. But sometimes, withholding is not control. It is protection. That hung in the air, but Elon, and this surprised even me, nodded. That's why I came back, he said. Not to demand. Not even to ask. Just, to understand. There was something in his tone I hadn't heard before. Vulnerability? Maybe. Or perhaps exhaustion. From the fallout. From the headlines. From the weight of carrying vision too far, too fast. That he continued. I know I made it worse when I didn't stay quiet. I know the things I said, or hinted at, painted you as the villain in a story that was never about villains. I tried to keep it above the noise, but, he sighed. I lost the thread. And then, the Pope did something that wasn't on any script. That he stood. Walked to a simple table by the wall. Picked up a small book, leather-bound, worn with time. Not one of the famed secret tomes. Just a journal. A printed copy of his own writings from decades ago, when he was still Jorge Mario Bergoglio, an unknown priest in Buenos Aires. That he handed it to Elon. We all lose the thread, Elon. The challenge is not to hold it tightly. It's to recognize when you've dropped it, and reach again with a steadier hand. That moment, quiet as it was, marked a turning, because while this wasn't a formal absolution, and certainly not a press opportunity, it was something else, a public peace, made in private. No grand declarations followed. No Vatican press conference. But the world noticed. Subtly, yes. Like the shift in wind before the rain ends. 3 days after the meeting, the Pope gave a televised address, not fiery, not condemning. He spoke, instead, of forgiveness in a digital age. Of how we are all learning how to be stewards of new tools that can build as easily as they can destroy. He spoke of mercy, of responsibility, and most curiously of second chances, and that was all it took. Within hours, the tone shifted. One by one, Vatican-aligned commentators began walking back the narrative. Not denying what had happened, but reframing it. A dialogue of correction. A moment of humility from two powerful minds. Proof that even giants can kneel. And just like that, the tension cooled. Musk didn't gloat. He didn't tweet a meme of himself shaking hands with the Pope, or Photoshop himself into a Renaissance painting. He simply said nothing. For once, silence was the strategy, but the effects were visible. Stock in Tesla ticked upward. SpaceX announced 2 new European partnerships, ones that had been stalled for diplomatic reasons. Even X, once flooded with anti-Musk tirades from religious communities, saw a shift in tone. People noticed. One investor told me off the record, he didn't just save face. He bought back goodwill, the kind money can't always buy. And perhaps most notably, for the first time in nearly a month, Pope Francis mentioned Elon Musk by name. During a private Q&A with seminarians in Florence, he was asked whether he believed tech leaders could be moral leaders. The Pope smiled that quiet, deliberate smile of his and said, "Some carry heavy questions on their backs. It is not always wrong to ask. It is only wrong to ask without reverence." Mr. Musk, I think, has begun to learn the difference. When Elon Musk left the Vatican that second time, he didn't look back. The car door shut behind him with a soft mechanical click, and the driver didn't say a word. No debrief. No photos. Just Rome sliding past the window like a dream retreating into daylight. The headlines hadn't caught up yet, but they would. Not with the meeting that remained sealed behind ancient walls and trusted silence, but with what came after. Because the shift, though quiet, had begun. 3 days later, Tesla shares surged 4.2%. Not much in the grand scheme of his empire, but the symbolism was clear. Confidence was returning. European regulators who had gone cold on Starlink started returning messages. And X, which had seen weeks of backlash and boycotts from religious and ethical circles, began to feel less hostile. No apologies were made, not publicly. But the absence of friction spoke louder than a press release. What helped more than anything was the Pope's subtle nudge, that carefully worded, deliberate comment in Florence. Mr. Musk, I think, has begun to learn the difference. A sentence that said everything without saying anything at all. Catholic news outlets, previously critical, softened their tone. A prominent Jesuit writer published a column titled "Ambition and Atonement: The New Pilgrimage of Silicon Valley." People started seeing the story not as a scandal, but as a parable. Musk, for his part, didn't jump into the spotlight. He didn't grandstand or gloat. He tweeted less. Spoke less. Worked more. He poured energy into refining Tesla's AI systems, ensuring the newest updates emphasized transparency and safety. He quietly approved funding for a new satellite array to provide internet access to schools in remote regions of South America, a region close to Pope Francis' heart. He didn't mention the connection, but others did, and then came the interview. It wasn't with a tech outlet or a financial network. It was with a small, well-regarded philosophy journal. Musk rarely did such things, but when asked why he agreed, he simply said, "I've been thinking more about legacy." The piece ran under the headline, "Curiosity, Limits, and the Responsibility of Knowledge." In it, Musk admitted that there were doors he still wanted to open, but maybe not all at once, and maybe not just for myself. It was the closest he'd come to a confession, and it worked. Even his critics admitted there was something different in his tone, still sharp, but steadier. The markets noticed. So did the media. And slowly, the narrative began to tilt. A month after the Vatican visit, Elon was invited to speak at the Geneva Summit on Ethical Innovation. A year ago, that invitation would have seemed obvious. 2 months ago, it would have been unthinkable. But now, it felt timely. He opened his talk not with a bold statement, but with a story not about Mars, or X, or electric cars, but about a room. A quiet room with stained glass and a voice that asked him not what he wanted, but why he wanted it. That he never said the Pope's name. He didn't have to. That speech, calm, reflective, measured, became one of the most shared videos of the year. Not because it was flashy, but because it felt like a man in transition. A visionary who had stared into the vault of history and blinked. After that, the pendulum fully swung. Donations to Vatican-affiliated charities rose, many from young tech entrepreneurs who, until recently, hadn't given a thought to Rome. Catholic universities requested collaborations with Musk's educational foundations. And the Church, in its own quiet way, began referring to the digital age not as a threat but as a field of ethical cultivation. And yet, there was one thing Elon never did. He never asked again. That he never inquired about the vault. Never requested another meeting. Whatever curiosity had driven him to the edge of forbidden knowledge had been tempered. Not erased. Elon Musk doesn't erase questions, but reshaped into something more cautious, more deliberate. People close to him noticed the change. His tone in meetings shifted. His pace slowed slightly. He began asking questions he used to ignore: should we, alongside, can we? And while the world moved on to the next drama, the next controversy, the next brilliant spark on the digital fire, those who watched closely saw it: the ember had dimmed, not gone cold but cooled enough to think clearly. He hadn't lost his ambition. But now, it walked with a shadow, and somewhere beneath Vatican stone, behind doors no billionaire can open with money or charm, something remained untouched. Waiting. Not hidden out of greed, but out of love for the line between what we can build, and what we must never replicate. Months passed. The world moved on, as it always does. New inventions, new controversies, new distractions. But something about that brief collision between Elon Musk and the Vatican left a mark. Not a scar, more like a fingerprint on glass. Faint, but real. Musk never spoke of the vault again. Not in interviews. Not in tweets. Not even, I'm told, in private. And yet, the weight of it lingered. You could see it in his focus, sharper, less impulsive. His projects didn't slow down, but the way he talked about them changed. Less about revolution. More about responsibility. That he began using a new phrase in meetings: long horizon. It meant looking beyond the next update, beyond the next market win. It meant thinking like someone who'd glimpsed the edge of something ancient and walked away from it. Behind Vatican walls, no official policy changed. The archives remained closed, as they had for centuries. The Church said little, offered no follow-up. But those close to the Pope said he sometimes reread the notes from that second meeting. And once, in a quiet moment after Mass, he said something that struck me: some doors stay closed not because they are locked, but because the visitor decides not to knock again. Elon Musk had become that visitor. In time, the public forgot the conflict, at least on the surface. But in smaller circles among historians, theologians, and thinkers who lived between the lines, the story remained. Not as gossip. As a kind of parable. About power. About restraint. About how even those who dream of stars must, sometimes, kneel before the weight of history. Years from now, they'll write books about Musk's breakthroughs, his companies, his impact. But in the quiet margins, someone will always ask, what did he hope to find in that vault? And what changed when he didn't? The answer, I think, is this: he didn't find ancient machines or secret blueprints. That he found a boundary. And in respecting it, he found something even rarer: perspective, and maybe, just maybe, peace.